On behalf of Library Director Tom Alberts and the Board of Trustees President Lauren Wells, good evening and welcome to tonight's program, Living in Transition, Newark Artists Speak. My name is Dale Colston and I'm the Principal Librarian at the James Brown African American Room of the Newark Public Library in Newark, New Jersey. The space is named in honor of the late James Library Brown, a librarian, poet, activist, and influencer who was instrumental in making sure that the libraries seek and maintain books and resources and present programs examining and celebrating the African American experience. I would first like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape First Nations on which we are learning, working, and organizing today. We acknowledge that nation and their many ancestors. We also acknowledge the devastation and the continued legacy of the transatlantic slave trade. Before I introduce our host for the evening, may I kindly remind you, if you have not already done so, to please fill out your census form. We understand that Newark residents are preoccupied with all that's going around us today, but so far our response has been less than optimal. We need to be counted and representation matters. Emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic are precisely why the government needs accurate census data. Public health experts, government officials, first responders all rely on population data to make critical decisions in crises like the one we are experiencing now. Census numbers mean more school lunches, art supplies for students, plans for highways, they support firefighters and families in need. So census results affect our community every day. So please visit my2020census.gov to fill out the census online. Again, representation matters. Tonight, we will hear from members of our artists and artivist community. We will hear about their challenges, successes, and plans for the future. Please accept our heartfelt condolences if you've experienced loss during this season. When this program was planned a few weeks ago, the coronavirus pandemic was what we were navigating through and around. Then on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by members of the Minneapolis Police Department. Protests against police brutality and systemic racism have taken place throughout the US and many cities and countries throughout the world. Today, we learned that all 4 officers have been fired and arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Tonight, our guests will share with us their thoughts about creating or not creating and simply living or merely existing through this unprecedented era in American history. We'll try to save time at the end for question and answers. Please enter your question in the chat and we'll relay them on your behalf. We thank you in advance. Now, please allow me to introduce our host for the program. Gary Campbell is a videographer, photographer, digital curator, ghostwriter, and TV cameraman at Channel 78. He is also the creator of the YouTube series, The Artist Recreates the World. He has interviewed over 400 artists about the purpose and intentions of artists in today's culture. As a staunch supporter of artists, Gary documents, informs, and expands opportunities for artists. Please join me in welcoming Gary Campbell. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I am here juggling with this board. Thank you so much. Thank Newark Public Library. Thank everybody that joined us. I have Josie Gonsalves. Josie has developed a social activist, artist, or writer. What is key to understand here is her ability to connect often the rhetoric of capitalism and academia to an authentic, artistic movement. She's a very powerful, not only writer, but insightful in terms of what's important for the artist and how we can connect to the whole. I also have Layqa Nuna Yawar. He is a public artist and multidisciplinary storyteller born in Ecuador and based out of Newark, New Jersey. And that's my man. I tell you, how he does those circles on the top of the buildings, I will never know. And Gera, where's Gera? Did she leave?
She's there.
Gera.
Yes.
I just looked at some of Gera's stuff and love her. Josie, you would love her. She's a radical, but she's a public artist. I'm passionate about activation of public spaces, community empowerment, and art as a healing tool. Gera is originally from the Amazon and grew up in Newark, New Jersey. So I want to welcome everybody. Justice 360 Poetry Night. Justice has been out there for a minute. He believes in his people, and he works hard to pull the community together with the arts. Thanks for joining us. And Sadie Soul Arts, did I say that right? Keep messing it up. But
Sadi,
thank you. She's in Europe and she joined us. She saw the post and I'm glad to have her again. I looked at her post on IG, great stuff, energetic, and you're right in the right place, you're right in the flow. So I'm gonna hand this over to Josie. This is her baby in terms of this topic, and then we're gonna go through. Everybody can feel free to answer these questions and join in. So Josie, it's on you.
Am I on mute?
Yeah, no, you're not. We hear you.
Hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to, I'm gonna sort of back into this a bit. So when Gary and I first met a few years ago, we did a live installation on artists living actually in transition. And at the time it was gentrification. And so we hosted I think a 3-day marathon, a facilitated discussion with artists on this very same topic, living in transition. How are artists making a living under gentrification? How were they identifying themselves within this transformation of the city, economically, socially, politically? I think Gary and I have been sort of in that space even since then. And so that, I think that Gary, was that in 2015?
2016.
2016, yeah. And those videos are on YouTube. Very powerful conversations with, I would say, how many artists, Gary? Over 50?
Yeah, came through the 3 days. Yes.
Over 50 artists who came through to talk about what it was like living through gentrification. When we conceived this idea, it was, how are you living? Because it's a constant, so art is created always in transition, in movement spaces, at least from, and I speak from my perspective. And so how are artists living under COVID-19 that is both creating economic dislocation, social isolation, and political deconstruction? And so how are artists interpreting this new space and being able to create in that narrow confine? Then we had sort of like the third slaughter of a Black man by police, a Black person by police, within a matter of a couple of weeks. So we were witnessing the invasion of one's bedroom where one was murdered. Then we witnessed the hunting, the predatory hunting of somebody else on a country road. And then we saw the lynching of someone at the knee of someone else. And so now we are seeing, we're seeing the economy sort of fall apart and society fall apart. There is there is the social contract between government and citizens seem to be fraying. And the fractured society that we've lived in for 400 years, we've been living in this fractured society, it's pulling. And so I wanted to sort of have this conversation with artists on how are you interpreting what's happening, and how is it impacting you politically and socially, and certainly to speak about the economic conditions under which artists who aren't being counted in the unemployment numbers, they're in that hidden number of people who've existed in sort of quiet spaces between formal and informal, and more so in the informal market. So I wanted to sort of, hear from folks on how is all this manifesting for you?
Josie, start off with that first question. Your first question.
So how is currently living in a deteriorating civil society, how is that impacting both from, because the COVID-19 was a manifestation, the impact on COVID-19 was a manifestation of an ill-prepared capitalist society and with no safety net. And so there's that falling away of human beings. And now we have another manifestation of living in a capitalist democracy that is America, which is the persistent of the degradation of Black and Brown and First Nation bodies. So how are you interpreting all of this? How does this come together, or it doesn't come together in your work?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I'll start first. To me, it becomes clearer that we're really living an illusion, and in an illusion. And when I say that, our commercials, whatever we see from the banking system, whatever we see from corporate, everything has a story, everything has a narrative. But if you look under it, it really has no depth. It really has no meaning. And I think with these events continuing to happen, as Josie is talking about, it just uncovers the layers of what people have created. Anybody else want to chime in? Lenny?
So we're having a conversation, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, it feels just like home to me. It feels very familiar. Like I left Ecuador when I was 14, and there was a lot of this social upheaval then. Like I remember going to protests when I was like 11 and 12.
Wow.
And knowing that I've had this sort of distrust in the cohesion of society made me believe in people, made me believe in community. And I trust people. I know that people that I know can make right decisions. But, you know, when we talk about the history of the US, the original sins of the US, the fact that when I live here, I don't see it as a fractured society. I see it as a society that's lying. That it's actually right now just beginning to look at its own history. It makes me feel as oppressing as it is, it also gives me a little bit of hope. Because it is a radical time and it's a time of change. And I don't think any of us are coming out of this quarantine the same again. And it's really up to us to figure out how we do that. And I think a lot of people are feeling that, right? Like we keep watching people go out and protesting. And yeah, it's a time of change. It's very radical. So as an artist, that's how I feel. I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Justice.
And thank you. Is it the pronunciation of your name? I'm sorry. Is it?
Layqa.
Huh?
Layqa.
Layqa. Okay.
Thank you.
No, that's awesome what you said, and it made me really think that this is the time for artists. I feel very comfortable. I haven't had to slow down. And actually, I was saying to myself earlier, not to sound vain, but I mean, I found myself being quite productive in this and being able to use it as an opportunity to reach people more expansively. But more importantly to me, somebody that's social justice is near and dear. Well, my name is Justice, is near and dear to me. I love this time. And I'm totally engaged in it, and I look forward to actually doing something intentional very soon. I think this is the time for the artist to speak, and I love it. This is what it's all about. I look at what I do through this lens already. Me being a resident of Newark, New Jersey, I stand on the shoulders of Amiri Baraka. I stand on the shoulders of the 67 Rebellion. So any show I do, I'm incorporating the people, organizations, local communities, and things like that. So I'm loving and reveling in this time and look forward to artists living up to our tradition. And I'm not old enough to be around during the 60s. However, I'm a studier of history, and I know that James Brown made I'm Black and I'm Proud in support of what was going on socially. I understand that Stevie Wonder made Happy Birthday to You to push legislation for Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, Junior's birthday, to be recognized federally. So I understand the artist's role, and I embrace it, and this is the time for that.
So we have a lot of people joining, so we're going to shorten up our comments, but we want everybody to join in. Just repeat the question, Josie, just quickly, please.
So living in transition, we are, in my opinion, we are consistently and persistently in transition, and we must be. We're constantly evolving, even if we're devolving. And so in this time of the economic dislocation, social upheaval, and political fraying of our society, how is all of this impacting you in the space that you're in, because we're on the lockdown? So how is it impacting you, and how is it manifesting for you?
Gera?
Yes, I want to follow up with Justice and feeling a lot of the sentiment that he's feeling as an artist. And I also want to say that when this began, the pandemic, I felt very much like quantum jumping to Occupy. I had like very similar emotions to 9/11. So I feel like we don't have to go back that much in history to have these traumas already within ourselves, our spirits, that we've gone through this before. And I remember during Occupy feeling so much how important art was at that moment, and friends saying, can you make me a poster for this? And can you make me a poster for that? And like, you're just like in service, you know, in service like of all your friends that are intellectuals and political, and, you know, they need the art. They have like the mind, you know, and the intention, and you have the vision. So there's this sense of community, the sense of coming together to make change happen. So a lot of that was like going through my system, like, wow, like we are like living this again. And even 9/11 in terms of pain, you know, like that, I was feeling that. But I had just started as an artist then. So it really felt like Occupy again. And it felt like it was time to be of service. It was time to do what you can to help the movement. This time around, I felt like Occupy had a lot more hope than we have this time around, right? This time around, I felt the sadness of like my people, of like walking out to do the groceries, and it would just break my heart. Like everyone was so scared, and the fear, it was so like tangible, you know, and I'm a very positive person, you know, so I'm like, oh, I'm sensitive and I'm feeling everybody's sadness. So I took it upon myself as soon as it began. I'm like, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to try to lift everybody's spirits and, you know, and be like bright and be colorful. I think the first design I made was like, make art and make love. Like, I was just like trying to be like the opposite of the fear, you know, the opposite of the sadness. So now that things have shifted into the other movement, you know, the police brutality and the trauma of, you know, the history of this country and of the world, I feel the same way, you know, but I also, you know, I'm not Black. So there's this sense of like, I want to be of service more than try to be representational, you know, because one thing is like using yourself, to represent, which is what I do in my work. I'm a self-portrait artist. So a lot of the times my family are my models, you know, my friends are my models. So this pandemic hasn't made it easy to go out and like shoot your you know, your melanated friends. It hasn't been, people are not that accessible as before. So that's been one of my challenges. But besides that, I I feel like what I want to do is continue to be me and to continue to be positive and try to lend my service of artistic abilities as much as I can.
Mm. Yeah, I want to add to that because I feel you on solidarity. To me, it's also interesting to think about how all of these problems are connected, right? Like how we've been failed by the government over and over again through the crisis, the health crisis, and through like systemic racism and this whole policy of over-policing. And to me, like that helps me sort of like guide the work that I do at this point. And connecting that to just being like inside, right, and not being able to go out has changed the way I work to a digital platform. And like we're all talking to our computers right now, like somehow creating community through that, right? So I think we're all just at the same time shifting and being fluid. One thing that I think protesters in Hong Kong were doing was have this fluid mentality in the way that they move the crowd through space. It's like there's less resistance, you go through that street. I think that's what we're doing as artists. Like we're finding ways to move through this moment of trauma.
Christy, you want to say something?
Hi.
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Hi. I'm an art teacher. I live in Newark, and during this pandemic, we've been, on this digital platform teaching. I'm a middle school teacher, and yesterday, I made a post about what's going on, and I asked the students as their check-in question how they have uncomfortable conversations, and then I made a little statement about anti-racism and how it's important to see color, and saying all lives matter is not really helping the movement, and that it's okay if you've caught yourself saying that. Anyway, so I attached like resources and links to a lot of other information, and I've gotten so far just one parent email my principal. And my principal, I thought, would be more supportive, and instead of having the uncomfortable conversation, is more or less saying to stay in my lane and to maybe take the post down. Not telling me to do it, but suggesting it. And so one of the things a mother said in the email was like, why are we talking about this in art? She's not a counselor.
Wow.
Counselors should be, so I want to respond obviously with like a lot of information, but right now I'm just I'm taking a step back because I feel like my leader's silence on this and trying to squash it is in a way showing his white privilege and not standing with the community members. And I teach in West Orange, and half the community is Black. So I think right now art is being stifled in spreading a message, especially also using it as propaganda.
Well, art is dangerous.
Oh, Christy, keep that fight going, Christy. Bless your soul.
I actually wanted to pick up because there are three things, and I want to put them all together. The whole idea of creating community in this virtual space, and the juxtaposition between being inspired and living in fear at the same time. And those two ideas, and I want to bring those two ideas together in something that I'm hearing from Christy, which is about surveillance. And we are yet to talk about that because we are living still very much in what Gera and Lenny talked about, which is the trauma, right? So we're still living in trauma. And I'm a lot older than you guys. So, and I was actually at Occupy. I was both at Occupy Wall Street and then continued into Occupy Sandy. The idea of surveillance has been with us for the length of the time of this country. And it is going to be, and I want to hear from the artists, and particularly because you're bringing this up, Christy, how your First Amendment rights, how your creativity, how the space that one must create to survive in lockdown, how is that being sort of shaped? And do you have a sense of that surveillance component?
Michael wants to say something. Michael.
Yeah.
You may not know me. I've been for civil rights since around 2012, exposed scores of cops killing unarmed blacks and always getting away with it that were not in the media. I also been serving the community. I've written 3 major books that are world-changing: Exposing the Money Machine, The Untold Nature of Christianity, and Angry Loud and Clear Truth. And I basically was the one who exposed that every politician in DC was complicit for 9/11, which was a demolition job. I also showed the real source of global warming. I've also showed, and I found out that this COVID was created in a laboratory, and it was basically exaggerated by the government and by the media, which works with the government. The media is basically the 4th branch of the government. Now, I know it may sound like conspiracy theory. It is not as conspiracy fact. I've done my research. I've tested my books on every word to be true. And basically, the reason we had the Floyd killing, which is a terrible thing, if you notice, the cop looked directly into the face of the camera and then basically did arrogantly and showed his cold-hearted murder. Now, why was it he would do that? When the protesters went to the murderer Chauvin's house, the police were there with sticks to guard him, and they knew what he had done. What is this? This is blatant they're trying to start riots. They found basically in Minneapolis that older white men had started the riots, had started the violence. And they also found piles of bricks piled up there conveniently ready for use. And they also found a document for instructing the people who started riots basically to keep secret that to be how to go about doing their business. And it was basically attached. It was basically sourced to Soros. And Soros has basically funded groups, liberal groups, which was not against, or not against Antifa, others, and even Black Lives Matter, because they're basically not hardcore, very radical groups. They're liberal, and they basically go in for socialism, which is a government control thing. I'm an social democrat anarchist. I have an idea for a new type of civilization that would move all evil out of it. There'd be no crime, no drugs, no greed, no selfishness, self-sustaining agricultural communities of sharing like that in democratic, but only 150 people each. I'm not going to go into all that. But I had no fear with COVID. I suspected it was induced BS that like the government usually does. And I basically found out later that most COVID people were tested for COVID and were found positive had actually had the flu or other viruses. And this is basically, to find this, look up Dr. Boutard, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Dr. Gary Null, Dr. Mercola. These are doctors, highly qualified doctors who basically are the ones who informed me, as well as hundreds of others.
Okay.
You are right.
Yeah. All right, thanks, man.
Thanks. So as a, I want us to come back to, to you, but I want, in the sense that how is your creativity being, how do you feel your creativity is being stifled or being inspired by the current conditions under which you live? So I want to come back to you on that, because that's really what I'm curious about. And I want us to go back to what Christy raised in a very painful way, the surveillance of one's space and one's creativity. And
so a mix of surveillance and censorship. Well, that's, it's, I mean, there's all these conversations are very deep. The way I think about them is the fact that, we're living like this hyper-capitalistic society where information and data is money. I could say that I want a car right now and my phone will feed me ads about a car. And it's true, like that's what our phones do. Facebook, it's run by Mark Zuckerberg, who probably has presidential ambitions, and it allows anyone to say anything they want in social media without any fact checking. That's the reality we live in, right? I think our generation and the younger generation are learning how to go around that, or how to use that in a different, interesting way, and in very creative ways, right? Like to think of the contemporary generation, the next generation is to think of a generation that's like native to this environment. So what are they doing? How are they doing it? by hacking the systems, by, you know, using memes as art, or using memes as like a way to shut down white supremacists on the internet, or using campaigns through the internet, or like even going to a protest, you leave your phone at home, or you use it to like throw your pursuers off. There are all these things that are happening that I think creative thinkers are finding ways around. For example, like, you know, creating another identity for yourself. I'm not very versed at that, but I find it really interesting. I'm actually doing a lot of digital work right now dealing with VR, so it's something I've been thinking about a lot as to, you know, how we find different outlets moving forward, but how you use that medium to actually speak about the larger issues, right? So since we're all going into digital, or like we're thinking about the digital, what does that do to our bodies, or to like the idea of community? Like the big questions for me is like, is this going to erode our connections or make them stronger? Because what I see on the street is that it's making it stronger.
Christy?
Yeah, Christy.
So to tie that like sense of surveillance and COVID right now, I think it was really demonstrated yesterday with Blackout Tuesday, where, you know, a message was spread and through the black square, kind of getting confusing, and in a way we were taking an artistic stand and in a way hijacking our artistic creative ability in this culture war. So right now, because we're all in our homes, it's now digital protest suppression, and the surveillance and the censorship. We could end up easily falling into a trap, and then fighting against propaganda and how imagery and creativity are making the illusion that things are the way that you think it is when it's really not.
Anybody else want to chime in?
This is.
Well, the surveillance definitely makes me think about how, you know, we're giving up so much of our rights. Fear makes us give up so much of our rights, and you do it so willingly when you just want things to go back to the way they were, instead of being courageous and thinking of ways to move forward that can be at somewhat of a balance and peace, you know, besides just willingly giving up all our rights. And this talk about having to vaccinate ourselves to go to certain places, it's like a dream for them, which I don't think is going to happen, because I think we're too smart. I think we're too woke at this point. I think that we are way more awake now than we were during Occupy, you know, and I think that they might have shot themselves in the foot giving us that time at home, because so many people read and so many people watched and so many people had so much time to watch documentaries and books. And it's like, you know, oh, well, I guess that didn't go well, so let's roll out the next, you know, plan, you know, so let's get them somehow another way to give up their rights. And then they put this on us, because honestly, I'm not saying that I believe everything I read, but I do love to read everything. And it sounds very suspicious to me, you know, it sounds very suspicious to me that a lot of people die, you know, and a lot of stuff is horrible and there's no justification for it, but they choose certain moments in history to blow them up and get us to give up our rights, you know, and we do. And I know, you know, having, you know, my parents and stuff, they're older, and I had to see my dad go firsthand to the hospital just based on fear. And they're telling him, you don't have anything, sir. And he's like, I'm dying, because the news is telling him the people his age are gonna get it and they're gonna die. And I'm just like, wow, you know, I don't own a TV. I never have, but I know that, you know, it's called programming for a reason. They're programming you, you know. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to research that much to know that how they shape our minds with our education system, you know, they shape our brains through the things, the commercials. So I like to definitely keep an open mind about what's going on today and not being so easily, you know, not so easily giving up our rights because of things that happen.
Gera, I wanna pick up on something because it's making me think about you know, I was part of Occupy, and before Occupy, we had, you know, I ran my own newsletter as an undergrad, an anti-nuke newsletter, and we had the biggest demonstrations in America we've had against nuclear weapons and against war. And I'm trying to get to a point that you're raising, is that this lockdown may backfire. My question to you is how much, and maybe Dale, maybe NJ Reference can help us, how much art on an individual level have you produced? And how much art have we seen produced overall, right? So is it still, because what I'm trying to understand is it still a subset of folks who are already reading, who are already engaged, who can recognize and sort of process through what's occurring? Or is that subset being expanded? And are we producing more intellectually as artists? Are we actually producing more? Has production gone up? We're all thinking about being creative, but has production actually gone up? Because remember, and think about it, it is within a certain time frame. So we've been in lockdown for about, I don't know, how long? 3 months, 2 months, March, April, May. We're coming up on 3 months. So there is the natural way in which the human being responds to new things or to trauma, which is you have to process it. You go back, you come forward, you stay, and then you move forward. How much art have you created in the time frame that we've been in lockdown versus, say, some other time?
Personally or everybody?
Everyone.
Whoever wants to answer.
Well, I've created a lot more art in the time during quarantine than I have before, because I feel some sort of obligation to be able to share, you know, what's going on and be able to heal. I mean, I'm personally not someone that if there's riots in the street, I don't put riots in my artwork. That's not what I do. I believe I'm a shaman. I believe that I come with the healing. I come with the love. I come with the cure, not with the same, you know, not with the problem. But to touch back on what you said before anyone else answers, I do think that people that had already some knowledge are more knowledgeable, and everyone a little bit more, you know, like the parent that couldn't have that time to read, or you know, the person that had to work now was able to sit down and expand their mind and open their hearts and their, you know, to new ideas. So I think it's a little hard of an assumption to think that people haven't been productive, whether it's reading or doing or thinking and sharing.
Yeah, for me, it's been interesting because I think there's, you know, we have different ways of processing, right? The art is that therapy, and is that that way of releasing, and that changes artist by artist. For me, it's been a way, I use art to ask myself questions and to maybe not answer them, maybe asking the questions more important. But I also make murals, and
I know, I missed them.
outside. Yeah, so I haven't been making any of those, right? So I also have a studio, and I have not been able to go to that studio. So I've been creating what I have, which is basically a digital platform, or like a computer and pen and paper, and just like things have been scaled down, but I also believe this is what I'm working with now. But what's happening is also allowing me to kind of hibernate ideas and plan and get ready. I've actually learned new programs on a computer to make this 3D design work. And I found that super healing and relaxing, and it's giving me another outlet to sort of like do the same work that I've been doing. But yeah, like beyond just like the feeling side of that, what happened with the pandemic is that all of my work for the next year is just being canceled or put back. So I'm sort of also rethinking how I function as an artist in the society. because like we don't know when we'll be able to go out again or to get together. And what I was doing was getting people together to make murals.
Yes.
So even that question is up in the air, like how is that going to happen? But I think as an artist, like that's what we're here for, creative answers. So I've just been thinking about how to deal with that. And I'm interested to hear from you all.
Well, I have to say, I've been forced to go in more spiritually and do more spiritual work because we tend, when in this fast-paced world, we tend to do everything else but the spiritual world, the spiritual work. Spiritual work usually comes later when we get in trouble, we can't figure it out. So, and for me, the art is so closely tied to the work of spirit. And it's funny that this country and the thing we have pushed away the sacred. Nothing is sacred. All of us are commodities. Everything has been turned into commodity. But when you talk about natural law, when you talk about art, it's the indigenous is all tied together. And so when you begin to do your spiritual work, whatever that is, I can't determine what that is, you tie back into the natural laws, and then things make sense. And the things that are nonsensical and don't tie in with natural laws are clearer to be seen. So I think this time for me has allowed me to go back and spend more time with my spiritual, my spirit and who I am, and the connection to natural law, which is totally tied in. If you look at any indigenous system in the past, that's where it's at. Everything is tied in. You're tied in directly with natural law. Somebody is on, should be muted because I can hear you. I'm done. If anybody else want to chime in.
I will.
Yeah.
I like Layqa. I spent a lot of time in my studio, and I'm a single mom, so I actually have my teenager at home full time now. And we've been in lockdown since the end of March, but I was unwell kind of mid-March, and I thought it might be the virus, so I stopped going to the studio from then just to protect the others at the studio. And the thing is, so I do art for well-being. I'm an intuitive artist, but I also do community work. So I've done murals and things, but a lot of it is very much based on getting back to ourselves, self-trust and trust for others, and building community cohesion and things like that. So one of the things I had planned to do was, for the next few months, I was going to be in the studio all day, every day, focusing on my own practice. Because I come up with my frameworks from that, but it's very much like journaling, and it's very much like just letting myself be. So I do flow art, which is, if I'm, upset one day, I might experiment with a certain technique, not think about it too much. And another day I'll plan it and it'll be very controlled. So it's playing with control and chaos and all sorts of things, facing fears, whatever comes up, I go with it. And so I run workshops doing this stuff anyway, but I hadn't intended to for a few months. But as soon as we went on lockdown, I was like, you know what? Even though my plan was in 3 or 4 months' time to take it online and start trialing sessions with my frameworks, I figured, you know what? I'm just going to jump in. I've got 10 years or more of the experience. Just because I haven't written it down solidly, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go for it. So I started running Zoom sessions, like 2 a week, and then sometimes live on Instagram and things like that, just so that even if it's one person that's getting to experience that and getting okay with whatever it is that it works for them. And so it's been really good so far in terms of having it, but it's been up and down because everyone's going through their feelings, and some weeks everyone's kind of really tired and drained, and so you have like 2 people show up, and another week about 30 people show up. But the feedback has been amazing. So I've, have been able to help other people go more inward and have the discussions. So it's usually like, we'll be doing playful art, but the discussions that happen during that time are so much more what it's about. They're very much based on encouraging introspection. And I'm loving that side of it, the amount that is encouraged other people to get creative. So for me, that's been a huge positive, even through the fears that people have been getting more creative. And I think digitally too, we were talking about the algorithms and stuff, like on Instagram with the blacking out yesterday, and how quickly people, clocked onto the fact that that was taking away from the voices that needed to be heard. Mm-hmm. And it was covering up the information and, educational posts that we needed access to, and kind of really quickly getting the message out there. Take your posts down if you hashtag Black Lives Matter, take it down if it's not educational necessary. And so I think there is that shift with, we're getting faster at being able to recognize when the sabotage kind of things are happening, and it's just not going to work in that sense. It happens, the attempts are there, but I think it's happened so often that it's not going to be a problem. But yeah, I'm now actually for June, I'm going to take time away from the online sessions, and I feel like I need to regroup and kind of take, what's the word? It's like a inventory of what I've done so far with the online sharing. I've been sharing so much that my own practice has been kind of sidelined, and I'm just kind of, actually, no, I need to get back to my own practice. But today I've had every emotion possible, I think, and I felt really frustrated and angry and sad. And I think, like Gera said, being a brown person but not black, and wanting to, obviously there's so many things that we can relate on, but at the same time I was like, no, amplify Black voices, but be that in-between person that I can share information with my white friends, and keep challenging, like this, for me it's the South Asian community and the British community, because there's a lot of English people thinking, oh, there's no racism here. And I'm like, oh, you are so delusional, beyond delusional. So no, I've been getting quite wound up by that and trying not to. And sadly for my daughter, she was slightly on the receiving end of my grumpiness, but I have tried to apologize. But yeah, it's been very much going with it. There's been, so to answer your question, Josie, it's been very up and down. Some days incredibly productive and I'm painting, and then other days not at all. And I'm definitely more like Gary in terms of focusing on my spirituality, being in the garden, lying in the grass. I'm really grateful, like constantly grateful for having a house and access, and but making the most of the technology as well, getting to know it and learning it, and kind of taking advantage of being able to reach people all around the world. So why not?
And introduce yourself. You're going to tell us where you're from, because you're not local.
So I'm Sadia from the UK. I'm in Cambridge in England. And yeah, so I used to call, like up till yesterday, I call myself a freelance and community artist, but I'm actually an intuitive and community artist. I wouldn't call myself freelance.
So I actually wanted to pick up on something that you all raised, but before I do, I recognize someone that I met when Gary and I first did our live installation so many years ago. And it is so wonderful to see her here, because I met her when she was part of a women's group that did a phenomenal multimedia presentation that Gary and I facilitated as part of the Artistry Creates the World. And I wanted to talk, because when we met, what was happening then, and now today you and I are reconnecting again, and we are there. I want you to talk a little, because we started out sort of, how are you living in transition in a society that's politically dissembling, that is, there's social dislocation, that you're living in an economic upheaval. So how are you living? And so we met when we had a similar situation, and people were responding in that similar way. And we've had this conversation here before you came along, that we're far more woke, we know better, we've learned all of these things. So I want you to talk a little bit about that media piece that you presented and now, and how is your work interpreting now and then? How has it changed? Tell us a little, I want to hear.
Danielle Scott?
Yeah, Neil Scott, yeah.
You know what? I caught this on Instagram Live and it just kept going in and out.
Yeah.
And I was hearing everyone's voices and I was like, I need to log in. I want to hear what's going on. And I'm in the middle of working on a piece.
Yeah.
When we met, the show was about Say Her Name. And it was about all the women of color who were killed by cops, not the men of color. Because what happens with the women of color, those become lost files. You know, the men of color are highlighted more often than the women. And when we did the exhibition that was curated by Armisi, Say Her Name, it was my first time actually taking time to look up those women, who they are, how they passed, and, you know, who killed them. And the majority of the women that were killed by cops. And they were killed by cops, even in their cars with their children.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces that I had in this show was a mannequin, and it was Eleanor Bumpers. And I made sure at that time, my daughter's 17, I don't know, she was 14, 13, that she helped me with that piece. And I made her help me with that piece for many reasons, because I wanted her to understand, even though you are a female, you're biracial, these things can happen. And they happen every day. They happen to mothers, they happen to daughters, they happen to little girls. And those names are not heard. So it was very important for me to be a part of Say Her Name. And with what's going on today, it has fueled something in me that I'm angry. I'm very angry. And I'm trying, as someone who is very peaceful, not to let it out. But when you have an 18-year-old black, brown, golden son who's 6'1", and then you have a 3-year-old, the same, you become furious and your heart hurts. You know, I watched my son become angry at everything that he's seen. And I'm trying to figure out how to deal with his anger, not allowing him out. He cannot go out to riot. We're not participating in that, but I will with my work. Yes. And my last series, my solo exhibition was Heavy and Loaded. The work that I'm creating right now, if people thought the work was thought-provoking and they didn't want to deal with it then for my solo, they need to be ready for the next solo, because it's already in the works. And I just have to let it out. I can't hold it anymore. You know, I can't hold back what I need to say to protect my children of color, all 3 of them. Mm-hmm. You know, no matter, and it's like, I said this in my video with one of my pieces, and one of my pieces in the Heavy and Loaded show was a large target, 7-foot target. The backpacks were filled. There was my son and my daughter holding hands, black silhouettes, and they were filled with bullet shells, empty bullet shells. The piece, I can't even tell you how much the piece weighs, but they are loaded with knowledge when it comes to the education system, right? But they're not loaded with everything else that they need when it comes to what's going on in the streets. And it's sad that I actually have to sit my children down and say, this is the way you need to act or react when you're approached by a cop, or this is the way you need to move, and you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. You know, my son went to a private school, Catholic school. He goes to a Jesuit college in Syracuse. And my son had to deal with being called a privileged nigger. And I hate that word. And that's the same thing with my daughter. We are Afro-Cuban. And, you know, you can't tell, we're not as dark as most. You know, my family is Polish and Jewish. And you're not going to know that when you see my child. You're not going to know that when you see my daughter. You're not going to know they speak 3 different languages. You're not going to know that they play 4 different instruments and they have a 4.0 average because they're 6'1", or that. You're not going to know those things. What you're going to see, though, is this. And that should not be the trigger for someone to pull it and say, oh, we shouldn't be born with targets on our backs. We shouldn't be born because our skin color is saying, oh, well, hey, let's just shoot them. So the work now Josie, the work has changed. And I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm going to continue. And I promised my son a couple days ago when I saw him angry, that all I can do is create. And the more I create and the more I push it out there and the more I put it into institutions, not just galleries, I need it to be seen. I need it to be heard, and I need kids to understand why I'm creating this work. And I'm not apologizing for it. I don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess that's my anger now.
Well, this is what we, yes, Gary, we're done.
Yeah, Dale, how are we on time?
We're closing it on time. Can we get closing remarks from you, Gary, and you, Josie? Thank you.
I'm sorry, guys.
No.
Okay.
No, that's a powerful piece. It sets us up to do this again, because this conversation I want to have, because we don't often get artists in metropolitan cities with the demographics we have in this metropolitan city having existential conversations. And that's what I want the artists in Newark to be able to have. Existential conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's my wrap up.
We welcome you. Yes.
Gary, I think that's my wrap up.
Okay.
No. Listen, I want to thank everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't get back to Michael and Chris.
Yeah.
But everybody, thank you for your part, your energy, your truthfulness, and I think this helps all of us, because I'm energized to do whatever I need to do. And when I see and I hear each one of you coming from these different places, you empower me. So I think that's what it's all about. And thank you, Dale, again, for being so professional. Thank you, Reggie, for coming on at the last minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Layqa Nuna Yawar, Josie, do you say Gonsalves or Gonsalves?
Just Josie.
Josie, Gera Luz, and Gary Campbell for their honesty and insight this evening. Much continued success. Please join the Jabbar and Friends of Jabbar next Thursday, June 11th, as we welcome Roxana Marroquin and Arelis Hernandez from Newark SAS, which is Newark Science and Sustainability, as they present ways to boost and build your immune system with foods, herbs, plants, and essential oils. You don't want to miss that one. That's going to be a good one. Thank you again. Be safe. And please keep in touch with Gary, and we'll surely have more conversations. Be safe out there, everyone. Good night.
Peace. See you online.
I mean, I'm black, but I stand with you. I have anger over every black person. Just because I'm white does not mean I don't have anger over the whites that come to blacks. Your problem is my problem, and I stand with you.
Thanks, Michael.
Be well.
Thank you.
And Scott.
Thanks, guys.